I'm Abrielle Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and I'm here today with our devotional speaker, John Paul Johnson. He's a physics professor here at BYU-Idaho, and he'll be speaking about Bound to Christ by Covenant. It's a pleasure having you here, but before we kind of begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself so our audience can get to know you?
Yeah, thanks, Abrielle. I've been teaching here at BYU-Idaho for 16 years. I came to school here in the 90s when it was still Rick's College, and we just love it here. My wife was a student here. She was here for the transition to BYU-Idaho, and we've got 3 kids. We're both from Utah, and we've just loved living here.
Yeah, it's quite pretty at this time of the year with the weather being better. What is something that you love about being a physics teacher?
Well, I teach some classes that are taught to people who aren't really interested in physics. They're taking it because they have to. And I really think those are the funnest classes to teach because you get to see people realize that the universe is a more complicated place than they realized before. And at least some of them love to learn about science, and they didn't know they would.
Yeah, science is definitely hard to grasp at first, but there's so many topics and things that you can develop an interest in. When I want to go to the point where you said the universe is complicated, because one of the first things that you mentioned in your devotional is about the paradox of the gospel, in the sense that we put constraints, we have covenants, and yet that brings us more freedom by having that weight of living the gospel. Can you tell me a little bit more about that idea of that paradox of covenants and the importance is to you to talk about this?
Yeah. The universe is a complicated place, but the beautiful thing is that the gospel is simple. The gospel of Jesus Christ is something that anyone can understand. And that paradox that you mentioned, one way to sum it up, I've heard my dad say, when we obey Satan, we give him power. When we obey God, he gives us power. And that kind of sums up what I wanted to get across in my talk.
What was kind of like the inspirations of discussing binding ourselves to Christ by covenants?
If anyone else is like me, I go to devotional and I ask myself, what would I talk about if that was me up there on the stand? And, I never knew if it would really happen. And I've had 12 or 15 ideas, and when the time came that they asked me to speak, I just asked myself, what is the one thing that you would tell someone? And I think the most important thing that I could tell the audience is that being a disciple of Jesus Christ is the most fulfilling thing that you can choose to do. And it's challenging, but it has so many rewards along the way, and ultimate rewards that we've been promised if we do it.
Yeah, I remember reading in your devotional about how many times you've asked yourself, and I feel like I've definitely asked this of myself, what's important for me to do with my life. And I think that's so important that you point out it's a disciple of Jesus Christ. That is kind of the most important thing you could do. And at a university where many people are kind of choosing their paths and kind of like what they want to do, I think that's such an important thing to hold on to remember. It might not be like a specific job or career, but it's a way of life that kind of should give them comfort that being a disciple is where they should be. Again, in your devotional, you go on to talk about how our covenants bring 3 things: power, protection, and purpose. Can you go a little more in depth of kind of like on one of those things and kind of what that means and how a covenant can provide that?
Sure. Yeah, and the list was longer, but I had to cut it down to 20 minutes. So it's not the only blessings we receive through covenant. Um, Let me talk about the protection that covenants can bring us. I really feel like if you keep your covenants and your relationship to the Savior central to your decision making and the way you view the world, you will see things in a way that help you make better decisions and help you to have more freedom ultimately um, because of the decisions that you make. And I feel like, I'm old enough that I've seen the results of some of the decisions of people that I know, and the people who I see that are happiest are those that have chosen to follow Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's so nice to be able to see that, because it can be hard. It can be hard in the moment, and you share a couple of stories where, or one in the Book of Mormon with Korhor, like it's hard sometimes to understand how living this could be so much better than choosing an easier path. But like you said, there's protection, and it definitely does make us happier. I like that you give a couple of different analogies in comparison to one of your, I guess, what I would say is probably one of your hobbies that you enjoy, hiking, and do you really love what's it called,
Snowshoeing?
snowshoeing? I've never done it. I think my sister has done it, but I just love those analogies of how those different things kind of really help and benefit in the end. What is, of these analogies, what is one thing that has really stuck out to you about that comparison or about that analogy?
Yeah, well, I do discuss snowshoeing in the talk, and if someone was to walk up to you on the street and say, "Hey, I've got this extra weight that you can add to your pack," I think you'd just laugh and say, "No, thank you." But if you're willing to carry your snowshoes up the mountain part way until you need them, you can get further up the mountain through snow that you can't travel through in just boots. And I try to make the point that I feel like covenants are that way too. Jesus says, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light." He's offering us a burden. He's saying, take up your cross and follow me. But with that invitation comes the promise that he'll be there to help us. It's his yoke too. He will shoulder the weight for us, and he'll help us to be able to do anything that he asks us to do.
Yeah, I love that verse in Matthew. Just it's strange to think that yoking ourselves will lighten our burdens, but that's exactly something that Jesus is able to do. It makes it lighter, and I have to agree. There's such a power in connecting ourselves to Christ. One thing that I wanted to talk about is the list of challenges that you kind of give to help people to challenge themselves and experience something, bind themselves closer to Christ. Is there one or a couple that kind of really stand out to you? And what would really help a student once they pick one of these challenges to really stick through it?
Well, here's one that's been on my mind this last week. I mentioned earlier when we were talking that I am reading the book Les Miserables. And at the beginning of that book, there is a bishop who, he's got his stewardship, the people that he's supposed to visit and represent Christ for. And one of the people that he goes to visit is a member of the convention who was involved in the French Revolution, and kind of ostracized. No one visits him, and I think the book says The bishop is assigned to watch over his sheep, and then it says, "But what a sheep" in this case. And the one of the ones on the list was get to know and serve the people that you're assigned to minister to. And that, whether you have another calling in the church or not, that's something we've been asked to do. And so this good bishop in that book goes and visits and really tries to understand this, I would say, hated member of society. And so if we're assigned to minister to someone that we don't agree with, that doesn't seem to think like us, that may not even be the same age as us, or in the same life situation, I think we should still make the effort to try to minister to them, to listen to them, because everyone needs to be listened to.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I would say it's definitely a challenge. Those are assignments. So it's not easy, I would say, at first if it's someone you've never interacted with or a different person in the ward, but it's that getting to know someone who thinks differently. And I do see there's such a value in getting to know someone, because I feel like when you get to know someone, you get to know Christ better. I always like to say it's really hard to hate or dislike someone that you don't truly know, because once you get to know someone, you know more about them, and I just think it makes it harder to have that wall when you get to know them. One of the experiences that you shared as a youth is when your bike got stolen, and I just think it's such an interesting experience, and it was something that kind of like you thought about. What is something that you could say about that experience and how it, I guess, taught you a little bit more about being a disciple when it wasn't easy?
Yeah, well, like I said, my bike was stolen, and it wasn't the last time in my life. I've been riding my bike to work and school for pretty much my whole life, and but it was the first time my bike had been stolen, and it devastated me. I just felt so bad about it and angry, and this experience where I was given the chance to forgive the person who stole it in person, and I took that chance. And then later, I found out that if I hadn't, I might not have had the chance to forgive him, at least not in person. And so I think that was a formative experience, because I decided it was not worth holding grudges in life. And I made the decision that I would try not to make enemies, and I've been offended many times. I've been offended this week, but I try to get over it as fast as I can and just move on with life, because I feel like those feelings of resentment and that the feelings of even the feelings of pain of being hurt by someone aren't worth carrying around. That's not a burden that we should carry around.
Yeah, there's certain hardships we'll face in life, but it again ties back to the whole Jesus Christ can lighten our burdens, and how that's kind of where we should turn and face. How have you seen like living your covenants and becoming more like Christ? How has that like impacted how you've lived your life or taught as a professor?
Well, here's another thing that didn't make the list. I was going to talk about how our covenants can bring us peace, and I feel like there's a lot of power in knowing that you have a clear conscience, and nobody's perfect. I haven't lived perfectly, but the ability to repent and let Jesus Christ make us into better people, make us into new people, is just one of the best blessings that the gospel offers us.
What is something that you would say or hope the students come away with when they listen to your devotional?
I hope they understand that I know that life is hard. It really is. And being a disciple of Christ isn't easy. He asks for simple things, but they're very difficult. And what I know is if we're willing to follow him, if we're willing to trust him, then he'll help us do anything that he asks us to do.
I'm Abrielle Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and I'm here today with the devotional speaker, John Paul Johnson. He's a physics professor here at BYU-Idaho, and he'll be speaking about Bound to Christ by Covenant. Thank you so much for coming in today to the station to talk more about the things you're going to be discussing, and I'm really excited for this devotional.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Abrielle.